Hey gang, it is the third Cedric and Ada Blade Steel Roundup. I haven't done one of these for a long time. I've done lots more testing since. I've started more testing methods, so I'm going to talk about steel for a while, if that's okay with you. If it's not, then there's probably another video out there on YouTube to watch to fill in your time. I'll probably go on a bit, I must say. I've got a rough itinerary. I'll just go through the results. I'll probably have a quick word about all the steels I've done so far. Very quick word, because I don't want it to go for hours. Then I'll do comparisons on the unleashed results. So I'll be speaking a bit about edge versus edge. Be talking a bit about the work sharp. What else have I got? Toothy versus polished edge. And then I'll go into some favourites, some steels that I think are good at different tasks. Steels to perhaps be wary of. Steels that I feel I need to do more research on. And then I'll answer some Patreon questions and just some other general questions I get from time to time. So should be a fun video if you're a steel spaz like me. Let's get into it. On my table in front of me, I've got all sorts of different knives, so let's get talking. So while I go through these steels, I am going to put ratings up. Now these aren't crazy accurate. They're just kind of how I feel each thing performs in each attribute on a scale of 0 to 10. So say edge retention, 10 is maximum. So you'll understand why then AUS 8 is probably going to be a 1 or a 2, because I need to put them all across that scale. 0 is like the lowest of the low, like the butter knife steels. And then just in the scale of things, in terms of percentage, I guess, of rope cut, so these two will be pretty far apart. And then say in stainlessness, LC200N, more or less stain proof steel, this will be the only thing that gets a 10. Most of the carbon steels will be down around the 2 or the 3. The stainless steels, 5, 6, 7. Just roughly anyway, and these are just my experiences. If I don't feel I've had enough experience to give an accurate number, I just haven't, and I left a question mark. So yeah, don't put too much in these, but it's just an interesting visual representation, I thought. So they'll flash up on the screen as I talk about each steel. Alrighty, so here in front of me we have steels from all ends of the spectrum, from both the very, very high performance, high edge retention, to the fairly basic budget. So Maximet all the way down through to AUS 8. These are all in order of the amount of cuts they've done, either these exact steels or variations of. So what's the list? How's it looking at the moment? Well, at the top is still sitting Maximet 563 cuts. Maximet is a technically very, very impressive steel. It's got really, really amazing edge retention, but is amazingly difficult to sharpen. Not difficult, rather, just takes time. It's wear resistant, so it'll wear out your work sharp belts. Stones will be more or less useless against it. You'll need your diamond kits. Not particularly rust resistant, but massive in edge retention, so good stuff there. CPM 10V was the next on the list. 10V, sort of similar to K390, a really high performer, not particularly rust resistant, but you can get those really high angles, so you can get like 15 DPS, no worries at all with it, and it's tough enough to be able to sustain those and not roll on you. Again, CPM 20CV, M390 and 204P. I've tested a few iterations of this sort of family of steel. Very, very balanced steels. They do everything pretty well. I would argue M390 feels a bit easier to sharpen to me than the other two have, but very, very marginal differences because the chemistries are very marginally different. ZDP 189, also in the same sort of class as these kind of high performance steels. It's not a tall steel, it's still technically a stainless steel ZDP, but it's not particularly stainless either. A bit difficult to sharpen, really high carbon content is what's getting its long lasting, very fine edge. Less magical, tungsten and niobium and other those super hard carbide formers. It's a great steel. 110V, I feel I need to take and do a toothy edge on, because 110V should be about a performer at the level of K390. I haven't been able to quite get it there with the work sharp edge. Remember on the Spyderco PM2, it cut 295 times. On the Manix 2, 281 times. So it's, I feel it might be able to get a little bit better performance with different edges, as most steels can. Down to super gold powder steel, Falkneven sort of premium steel. That's good stuff, holds a great edge, tricky to sharpen, relatively stainless, usually because it's clad. I think on its own it would tarnish and patina quite quickly. CTS 40CP, that's like a powder steel variant of 440C with some extra cool stuff in it. Strider uses it. It's a good steel, very much like an LMAX style feeling steel to me. M4, I got a pretty good result on it from Benchmade, and I got an okay result on it too from Spyderco. 280 cuts on M4. M4 feels again a bit like K390, sort of a cross between K390 and Maximet. It takes a really acute edge. A bit finicky to sharpen from time to time, not particularly stain resistant. Probably a little bit less tough than K390, like perhaps a little bit more brittle on the edge, but not a great deal. Very much like any of these sort of high-speed tool style steels. S90V, again, feels a little bit similar to those. It's not particularly easy to sharpen. It's got moderate rust resistance. It's still classed as a stainless steel, holds its edge for a long time. I think it would benefit from a toothy edge rather than sort of the work sharp edge that I put on. But I use the work sharp edge for ease of testing. K390, so this got 242 slices with the work sharp edge. And that is indicative that I then did an unleashed test with it and got just under 400, like 396 or something. Much better off with a different edge, K390. Your work sharp edge is like a sort of somewhat half polished convexy type thing. This needs acute. This is like a performance steel for getting that right edge for it and really giving it its best chance. Then to CTS XHP, great all-purpose steel. Sharpens pretty easily. It's not particularly rust resistant. It is a bit more rust resistant than your standard D2 I've found, but probably best in the coated form like this. But then you don't really see the Spydercos that use it rust away to nothing either. A little bit tricky to sharpen, some would say, and I'd tend to agree. It just takes a little bit longer using my Lansky system, that's for sure. LMAX. LMAX is here. LMAX is a great steel. It feels like a version of M390 that's just not quite as good in edge retention, but about matches it and everything else. A little bit easier to sharpen as well than the M390. So good steel, good stuff, LMAX. Some issues with some companies heat treating it years ago. I think all that's blown over now, so I'm pretty happy to say LMAX is groovy with me. LC200N is probably my other favorite blade steel, just because it's completely stainless, more or less. As in like stainless for a week or so in the sea is still stainless. Get a knife like this with all titanium hardware. I think Blade HQ rust tested this, and the only thing that went was the washer went a bit funky on them, so there you go. But yeah, great steel. Doesn't hold its edge for a crazy amount of time, like compared to Maximet of course, but just so balanced. For a pocket knife, I don't know how it is with impact tasks really, maybe I need to test that, but it's great stuff. Vanitas 4. So Vanitas 4 is a great fixed blade steel. It's like a 3V, souped up version of like a 3V style steel, so ultra tough, holds its edge for a good long time, and it's very stable stuff. Expensive and very modern, so you don't really see it too often. This is in a zero tolerance. It's a bit like 4V, so there's 3V, there's 4V. Yeah, great stuff. When you put the right edge on it, it cuts for ages, but even with a work sharp edge, it cuts probably longer than any dedicated fixed blade steel I've seen so far. So that's good. 3V again is also great, like a real good combination of elements there for what you want in a fixed blade. Cold steels lasted a little bit longer than Bark Rivers. They might have just had a higher Rockwell or something similar, but both are really impressive. Definitely, they're in the middle in terms of absolute edge retention, pretty much dwarfed by complete nut steels like these. But yeah, really good stuff, 3V. And you see what people do with it. It's completely tough, completely excellent. A little bit, prone to rust, but nothing you can't manage if you take care of your knife. S35VN, probably my most extensively tested steel. Here it is in a Kaiser. I've tested it from Kaiser, from who else? Kaiser, ZT, Chris Reeve. Have I done Spydercos? I can't remember, but I've done probably four different knives from different companies in the S35VN, and it's universally pretty decent, except for a couple of ZTs that let me down early last year. But then even my ZT 0220 pulled a perfectly respectable result. I think 191 with a work sharp edge in the end. So I think those problems are behind the ZT. I would hope so anyway. But just be cautious. You might need to put a bit of a higher angle on it to get the best performance out of it as well. Working the way down. CPM 154, well, we all know how that worked out. It ended up being A2 on my Bark River, but What a great steel in terms of edge retention. Bark River's A2 steel is excellent. It lasted the longest out of all the non-powder steels. I'm yet to get 154 back again. I do intend on doing it, but there's not that many knives in it really that you can just buy a production. You know, I'm sure you can get a custom dealie made for you, but the Kershaws do it. But remember, they're all assisted, so I can't get them here. Righto, rushing through. Laminated COS by Falkniven underwhelms me for the price that they charge for it. It has about the performance of, you know, a basic powder steel. CPM S30V, I feel I need more variants of. My Benchmade did 175 cuts. I feel that that should even be, especially from what I've read, I feel it should be able to get to at least the level of S35. S35 was actually made to be not as focused on edge retention and better focused on not chipping and things, so must do more testing on S30V. HAP 40 as well, must do more testing on it. My only knife I've tested on was a Man Bug, which is a blade that's about this long, and I think it was just a case of the edge just got used more rather than, because usually I'm just using a certain part of the blade. With that knife I used the whole edge, and I don't think it was a fair test. I'm keeping the number there until I can put a better one in there. But yeah, HAP 40 to 173, most are feeling that it should probably have done, you know, within the realms of these guys, so we'll see. Nylox, great fixed blade steel, seems pretty stain resistant. It did speckle when I did the rust test on it, but it's easy to sharpen for a D2 variant. I felt it much easier than say XHP, easier than a couple of D2s I've had as well. Nylox is good stuff. 154 cm, probably one of the better stainless non-powdered steels for sure. Pretty broad attributes across the board. It's good for both folders and fixed blades depending on treatment. D2 is another funny one. You never know what you're going to get with D2. You can get it on the Vox rolled, which does really well for me in the fixed blade, or you get this Kizzle Biker, which didn't last particularly long at all. The Viper Keeper didn't last particularly long at all. And then you get the Ontario Rat 1, which lasted a good long time. So D2 is a funny one. I think it's very much a bit of a temperamental steel, and I think some makers maybe underdo it. I think some Chinese makers probably say that it's D2 and it's not as well. I think I had a case of that with my Y-Start knife. CTS BD1 has a great result from me from cold steel, 112 with the work sharp edge. Seeing as it's usually priced about the same as VG10, definitely a great budget steel. CPM S35V, and I've got a separate list. I'm sorry, I'm going off a list here. Just those ZTs that scored a bit low. I think I've spoken enough about them. O1 tall steel. O1 is a bit like D2. It's all in the treatment. It's an old steel. This is a remarkable treatment of it. Tyndall Knives is O1. Really, really durable. I've done all my testing on this one. Chip tested it, all that sort of stuff. It's excellent. It really is. You know, the edge retention is not going to be 3V levels, but it's just never going to break or fail on you. So if you're after a good survival knife or a good, you know, durable knife, getting a Tyndall knife especially, I mean, this is a beautiful knife too, I must say. Getting a Tyndall knife in O1 is a great stop, without a doubt. I'll talk more about those later anyway. All right, AEBL, good stainless steel, tough, good for fixed blades. Sleipner, a little bit underwhelming for the price you pay for it. This is it in my line steel. Probably a better fixed blade steel than a folding steel because it rusts really easily. The edge retention was on par with the D2 really, so just for the amount I paid in this line steel, I would have liked a little bit more performance, that's for sure. 80 CRV2, the Tarava Puko steel, that's this stuff here. Great fixed blade steel, they call it 3V, like light diet 3V. Edge retention is nowhere near 3V, it's about half of it in terms of rope cutting at least, but it's super tough, really malleable as well, easy to sharpen, good steel, really good. More than happy to have a knife made of 80 CRV2, that is for certain. X12MF, that's a Russian D2 variant, did just fine, probably a little bit on the softer side compared to some other D2 fixed blades. Had it in a Kizzle knife. It's absolutely fine. 14C28N is Mora's new go-to steel for the Garberg stainless, and it's been Kershaw's US knife stainless steel for a fair while too. It's good stuff. All the Chinese companies have upgraded from 8CR13 to that. If only the US-based companies that still build knives in China would do the same, because it has a definite improvement on edge retention, probably within the realm of, say, you know, a 35% increase on 8CR13 MOV, and rusts less easily and just is a general better performer. 1095 Crovan, good fixed blade steel. You know, these basic carbon steels, you know, this has a couple of extra stuff, obviously a bit more chrome, more vanadium, given the name. Holds its edge for a little bit longer than standard 1095. Good stuff, good for the purpose of being a big fixed blade to womp into stuff. N690 CO, I've had a single knife in it, the Spyderco Pingo. I trust Spyderco to do an optimal heat treat on something, and it didn't do very well, considering that sometimes you pay like, Viper will ask for, you know, $300 for an N690 knife, you know. The Europeans love it, and I'm not quite sure why. It's highly stainless, and you know, the edge retention is fine, but again, I'm fine for paying that much for a Delica for $100, but when you pay $300 for a knife, you kind of want more premium, I would suggest, because these are all $300 knives too, and they, you know, this is less, and they all last, you know, a lot longer. Right, 4116 is like a fairly basic stainless steel, doesn't last too long. Cold Steel uses it in their budget knives. It's about on par with VG10 or Paul Boss treated 420HC. Good stainless steel, tough steel, holds its edge just fine. Boss's 420HC is a good heat treater 420HC. It's tough, it lasts long, it takes its edge, you know, just fine. Good, very manageable steel. The Opinel steel, C75, it's just a fine basic carbon steel, does all the tricks, rusts like crazy though. AUS 8, had a few AUS 8 knives. This is my Al Ma, this has got 60 cuts. This is the best I've been able to get from AUS 8 with a workshop edge so far. And yeah, it's fine for, you know, a knife under $50. This is a $150 knife, so it's a complete rip-off in this. But AUS 8 will be relatively rust resistant, relatively tough, actually quite good for fixed blades. Just the edge retention is nowhere near what, you know, knives can pull with other steels for sure. 5160 is a tough steel that's not geared towards supreme edge retention, but you can basically climb the side of a mountain with it and it'll hold your weight. It's great steel, but yeah, rusts fairly easily and doesn't hold its edge for too long. 8CR 14 MOV, a slight mod of 8CR 13 MOV, held its edge for a slight bit longer. That may just be down to heat treat. 12C27 in an Opinel is a lower carbon version of 12C27 and held its edge for a less time accordingly. AN58 is a European version of 440B steel, I think, or 440A. It was just okay, but you pay a lot for knives in it sometimes from Nieto, and they sort of say they try and talk up as a custom homebrew super steel, but it's not. 440C, you never know with 440C, it's in lion steel, which did alright for me. I've got a Kizzle knife, which seems to do alright in it. Ganzo says their knives are 440C, and they kind of just perform about the same level as AUS 8, so who knows. 8CR 13 MOV is the steel that you know, did sort of buoy the budget knife industry for, you know, the late part of the 20s and, you know, the early part of the 2010s. I think we can all move on from it now to 14C28N. That seems just as available in China. If only CRKT and Cold Steel now and Spyderco would start doing the same, because it's just outperformed by those steels in every sense and doesn't seem to be, you know, any less cost because they're still selling their knives at great prices with the better steel in them. Getting into the real dregs from here, 440A, 5CR15 MOV, 7CR13 MOV. They're all lower carbon or mid carbon stainless steels that don't do very well in much, to be honest, apart from being very tough. Victorinox's steel is just fine for what Victorinox owners expect of it, to pretty much be collectible, for the knives not to rust away while they're storing them and playing with them, and, you know, be able to be sharpened and brought to a keen edge when they need it. So totally fine for the purpose, and you don't pay much for it. Z Hunter steel, junk steel, which is just from generic internet knives, and butter knife steel, all shouldn't be put on knives, apart from butter knives, of course. So that's the full roundup. That's a lot of talking. Thanks for listening so far. Let's get into some other questions and queries and comments. Alright, so first up is edge versus edge. I use a workshop edge in my testing simply because I have a workshop machine. It's 20 degrees, locks in, you put it in the guide, it's held, and you pull it through. It gives you the best, easily replicable 20-degree edge without taking a long time. So I can pump these tests out for you all because you all seem to enjoy them, and I do enjoy doing them. So it's just a matter of practicality. As far as when I've compared what I can get off a Lansky to what a workshop, the Lansky edge, so say you compare your unleashed results, LC200N, the Spyderco Spidey Chef, with a Lansky edge, 20 degrees, polished, does 330 times. with its workshop edge, it did 226. So you get about a 35 to 40% increase in edge longevity by having like more of a refined edge. The workshop edge is great for like a durable edge that isn't going to chip out on you, that isn't going to roll or fail, that will keep a good working edge for a long time. But if you want this absolute like paper slicing sharp, then it's just the time you put into something is obviously going to pay dividends. So that's what I've found from this sort of unleashed testing. Pretty much all the knives perform about 30% longer with a honed edge that took time to do, and that's just the rule of life, though, isn't it? You put more time into something, it's probably going to work out better for you. Workshop is great for just knocking good to great edges on everything. Lansky is where you get your excellent edges. I'm sure Edge Pro Apex you get your godlike S-class edges, whatever. So there's that. I'll cover so toothy versus polished edge. I'm starting to branch out into that. I did K390 with a polished edge and it did 396 cuts. It's been suggested with a toothy edge it would far outperform that. So that is definitely on the cards. Maximet, this is wearing a toothy edge right now. I'm just waiting to get more rope to do its cutting testing with it. S35VN on the other hand though did better with a polished edge versus a toothy edge, and it would just be the elements and how they respond to how they sit proudly at the very edge, and if they tear out, if they just roll over, whatever it is. And it's just all down to the chemistry of the steel and the heat treatment. So this knife did better with its polished edge. So it's not the golden rule for everything. I think the rule is that if it's a high-speed tool steel, going to do better with a toothy edge. But if it's it's a powdered stainless steel, might be better with your polished edge. Who knows? But it's definitely a thing. It is definitely, the edge choice is as important almost as the steel choice when you're using a knife and sharpening a knife, without a doubt. So what else have we got to talk about? My favorite steels. Okay, I've got a list of my top 5 favorite steels for a folding knife. 20CV M390 family, that's number 1. LC200N is probably the second. It's just not quite as a performer as the M390 family. Then you've got XHP as a brilliant sort of really good mid-level steel. I've got LMAX, which sort of feels a bit like the M390, really malleable, good stuff. And then at the bottom I've got, it was M4, but I think I've started to prefer K390 a little bit more. This knife has seriously impressed me with its durability and stability, and just its overall crazy keen edge and performance. I know M4 can get crazy keen, but I think I've put this one through a little bit more shit, and it's really stuck around, and the edge hasn't rolled despite accidentally brushing against concrete and all sorts of stuff that knives shouldn't be doing. So those are my favorite. My favorite steels for fixed blades. All right, let's go to the table and have a look. All right, favorite steels for fixed blades. I think the best overall fixed blade steel I've had at just being good for everything is this Vanadis 4. It's crazy expensive though, and you could probably substitute it for 3V. I like this more though. It does seem to be a bit more stainless, and it does seem to be a little bit better in edge retention, and you can absolutely abuse it, and it's purpose built for this being ultra tough, great, but it's expensive. On the mid-range, I think you're best seeking out some well heat-treated O1 or A2, so I can vouch for LT Wright and Bark Rivers A2, Forrest Tyndall's O1. Get something like this for your mid-price knife, or even still, if it's still a high-price knife, I think the fixed blade companies will put the work into getting an optimal heat treat rather than the companies that make a bit of everything. So I think if you seek out a fixed blade maker like Bark River or LT Wright or Tyndall or one of the other good ones, then I think this is a great place to sort of settle if you can't find this. In terms of budgets, carbon and stainless, this is brilliant budget carbon steel. The 80 CRV2 does everything you want for a basic carbon steel to do. And I love the 14C28N. That would be sitting here if I'd kept my Garberg, but I didn't. But in its absence, I love just the basic 420HC and the Gerber strong arm. Has the toughness of this stuff. You can completely smash and trash it. And then, the edge holding, you're gonna have to sharpen it a bit. But it's fine, it's pretty stainless. Does everything I want a fixed blade to do just fine. What steels is the jury still out on? Am I not quite sure about? S30V I think needs more testing. I need to just get more versions of it. It's just funny, most of the knives these days are made in S35. S30V, some basic Spydercos use it and some basic Benchmades. And a lot of them have kind of moved to just jump straight to the S35VN, so who knows. But I'm sure it's within my realm to find some S30V. It's not like it's, it's not rare as gold, of course. And HAP 40 I need to do another test on because I'm not happy with my man bug test. I want to get like a Delica, like a knife center Delica in it or something, and give that a go. As always, D2, I'm always very curious about whatever's labeled as D2 is testing it because it just seems so all over the place. And most of the other steels are quite constant from maker to maker. D2 just seems like nutty. Yeah, 440C as well, a bit like D2, I think it's so variable. I think lots of people say it's 440C when it might not be as well, like lots of the overseas companies. I'm not sure, can't really base it on anything, but just kind of how it feels. It just is too variable. But then heat treat, of course, is a lot. But as I'm starting to really refine my edges and I'm confident the workshop edge is repeatable, it just does seem like it should be a little bit closer together. But anyway, I'll move on to some general questions. These are from the Patreon folk. They Patreon me, so say, hey, who wants to ask me some questions? I'll do it in my next video, my next roundup. Tony asks, haven't heard me talk about CPM crew where I post any results. He'd love to hear my take on it. I would love to know my take on it as well. I had a Spyderco Para 3 on order from Knife Center, but they stopped making them, and I got this really crushing email saying, sorry man, your knife's not coming ever. So I'm just after something in crewware to have a go on, and it's just not a super common steel. Some fiddlebacks are made in Crew Forge, but yeah, it's just really waiting for the next sprint run of something in it and then grabbing one. So that's definitely on the cards, but yeah, I want it to happen too. Bart asks, I'd like to see me address steels that I'd like to see fade away into history and those you'd like to see specific manufacturers move towards. Do you see consolidation in the steel market in the future? Is there pressure on Crucible to innovate harder with Bowler and M390, Carpenter and XHP, and Zap with LC200N being all the buzz? The place for the CPM 20, 30, 35, 90, 110 and even M4 seems to be under more and more pressure. That's true. There's a few questions in that. So, with regards to the steels I'd like to see fade away, I just would love to see the eclipsing of 8CR by 14C28N. That's the main thing. I'd love to see VG10 slowly migrate to 154CM or just basic S35VN. I think it seems possible. The amount the Chinese are able to sell it for seems possible. That's what I'd like to see the most. But I do love the variety. I love makers being intelligent and thinking about what steel is best for their knife. It shows that they've got conscientiousness about, people are actually going to use this knife, not just play with it. We think this knife would be best for this steel, and this steel would be best for this pattern and purpose. So as long as companies are doing that, rather than just blanket, this is our steel, this is one we always use, I'd prefer that. I love the variety. All the steels are a little bit, they're different enough from each other to warrant it. So I'm happy with that. Crucible, pressure on them. Well, they do still kind of provide like the most sort of reliable, I think. Carpenters are doing Maximet, which is obviously the highest of the high, but then Crucible do Rex 121. So that's just not quite made it to many steels yet. Rex 121 is probably the highest performance edge retaining steel so far put on a knife. So I think Crucible could very well get there if that starts coming out, but then they've just got a really solid stable of steels that I think are always going to do well. I even noticed Cold Steel is starting to move away from XHP into S35VN now, so whether or not it's moving back towards Crucible, perhaps they've got a better deal with, trades or taxes or whatever it is. I know there's a bit of economic stuff going on in the US right now, so maybe Crucible and Carpenter are sort of getting better grants and getting better conditions and things to be able to perform. Obviously Crucible selling their steel to China, the S35VN does seem to be theirs, so I wouldn't be too worried about or commenting on too much about them needing to change up too much. As long as they're focusing on providing the makers with the right resources to get the best out of their steels, I would love to see the steel makers provide, at this heat treatment, this angle will get the best edge retention, this angle will get the best toughness. I'd love to see a bit more of that from them. They are the experts after all, and they should know these things. They probably do, but it's just be great if they provided it to us, so guys like me don't need to do all this testing and break our hands. And the last question was, Ryan asks, what's your favourite budget steel, performance steel and high-end steel? So my favourite budget steel was probably the 14C28N because it's got really broad applications, great for fixed blades, great for folders. It seems to be sold under 50 Australian dollars even most of the time. So in terms of a true budget steel, I'd say it's definitely that one. in terms of nice widespread use, seems to be available, good stuff. My favorite performance steel, I love the K390s and the Maximets and the M4s. They're all just, edge retention and cutting ability versus all else. So they don't make any affordations for stainlessness or, there's a bit of toughness to go on these, but they really are pushed, especially Maximet, towards just cutting a lot of times. And you've got to appreciate that. In terms of just performance in a single attribute, it's either of those three high-speed tool steels I enjoy a lot. In terms of high-end steel, got to be the M390 family. Just a real balance. They almost cut as well as those aforementioned high-speed tool steels, but they also have great stainlessness and great levels of toughness as well. You just pay a whole lot of money for it, that's all. So those are my three, I guess, for those categories. Sorry about that, the camera went flat, talking too much. Last question was, can Spyderco finally kill off the VG10? I don't think it needs to be killed off. I'm totally fine with all those steels, all the lower steels, as long as when you have a lower steel in your knife, that it's going to perform lesser. As long as you don't charge a huge amount for it. So Spyderco needs to stop with things like the Ouroboros, the Rock, the Parada, all those knives that are coming out with VG10 but still sold for $200 US. That's what they need to stop, that's what they need to kill off, not the steel itself. I am fine with Delicas being made of VG10 for $100, no problems at all. Just the knives that are made of essentially the same ingredients, just because they're made in the Taiwanese factory, or I'm not even sure where the Ouroboros is made. But things like that with the Rock, I know there's a bit of a designer or a niche cost they put on them, but that's the thing. If they're going to charge that much, I would prefer a bit more performance than VG10 can offer, but really it comes, Spyderco's knives always come very sharp, and they do perform well for you regardless, because they always ground very well as well. But in regards of killing it off, no need to kill it off, just stop charging so much for it. Or the knives you do want to charge a lot for, just put S30V in it at the very least. Something that's going to, VG10 you do notice it goes dull, like through actual EDC use. And the average user will notice that, I think. Whereas like say your S35s, people will be, oh, wow, this knife never feels like it goes dull. Non-knife people who kind of just use the knives a few times a week and aren't always like me looking for stuff to cut with knives, they probably wouldn't notice those things go dull as quickly. So I just think that it would be great to move past it in some senses, but it's fine to be in the stable. Of course, you can't have every steel. Not everything can be made. If we decide to scrap every steel that perform below, CTS, XHP, then the knives, there wouldn't be any well-priced knives. And the thing is, the budget steels do provide knife makers an into the production world. So, I often criticize CRKT for using nothing but 8CR13 MOV. And, I think that's a bit of a fair call because there are better steels than that. But whether it's 8CR or whether it's, upgraded to 14C28N, it's still a great opportunity for these makers to get their production knives made, so then they can perhaps get a really good production knife made. So, get something done with CRKT in 8CR13, build your profile up a bit, then make something with maybe Spyderco, and they'll make it for you in HAP 40 or some cool exotic steel that Spyderco use. So I think that's the good part of the good equation with the lower steels, is it often means, eager company with versatile machinery plus new designer plus budget steel plus low cost equals a bright future for all, perhaps. So there is a place for it, and place for VG10, but I wouldn't mind seeing it get just kicked off those really high price point knives, because a bit like SOG still sells those premium VG10 Japanese steel. That's just falling into the whole Kill Bill, Hatari Hanzo steel kind of mythos. Japanese make lots of very average steel as well. Like they do because they want to, because it's cheaper to make average steels. So, they sell these Japanese high performance. There's kind of like two adjectives that don't really mean much, but lots of companies still use them. So, SOG probably even more so than Spyderco need to tone their rhetoric down about it and just maybe start using a better steel. So, we'll see. Wrapping up. What else? What do I do with all the twisted sisal? Well, I was making dog beds for the dogs with it. Now it is kind of just starting to pile up. So I'm thinking about doing. I'm thinking about making it into fire tinder and putting it in bags and mailing it to the Patreons, just as a free thing. So I'm thinking about doing that. If that works out, it'll happen. I'm just not sure how good it is at being a tinder. It should be fine because it's natural. It's also quite compostable, so I actually have been putting a bit in compost, and I'll probably just put whatever soup emerges from that on the garden. But yeah, I do go through a lot of it. So say the Maximet test, I assume that'll use a whole reel. The M390 test used a whole roll of it. Had probably maybe that much left of a 10-meter length. I can cut finer and closer together, but then I find it's a bit more dangerous to worry about nipping my fingers sort of thing. So there's that as well. So yeah, I do use a whole lot of that twisted sisal. So that's true. I will. I'm definitely thinking of things to use it for. That's for sure. What else? I reckon that's about all I felt like talking about today. As usual, my test is just one way, it's bro science, it's one way of getting a rough handle on how your knives might perform if you get a knife in a certain steel. All I'm after is really getting the basic grades of steels rather than finicking over the exact numbers. This one's 3 cuts better. I wouldn't look at it like that. I just look at where they generally sit on the list. Just to know that it's true that Maximet will cost you a lot of money, but it will outperform, say, S35VN by a real margin, like by a meaningful margin. Whereas S35VN will cost a lot more than VG10, and again, it will outperform it by a good margin. Whether or not it'll outperform, LC200N, I'm not too bothered about, and it's not really the aim of these tests. It's just to put everything in a rough hierarchy, I think, and that's what I've sort of aimed to do. And positively, that hierarchy does seem to match people's experiences and also other forms of, more scientific testing as well. So I'm kind of happy with how it's all going. I will continue to use the workshop edge just because I've started with that, but with knives of interest, I will get that Lansky out and put the specific edge on there to get the better results as well. So I know not all the steels I can do in-depth testing on because they're often loaned knives, and so I can just do the basic one and send it back. If you have a knife that you want to send me, it's probably fine, but I'd rather you're in Australia. We can maybe work something out if you're in the US, but I'd rather you're in Australia because I sent my Viper Keeper to a guy who wanted to buy it, which was awesome, but it's not got there. Shipping without tracking is like $30 in Australia, or with tracking that just says it's left the country and that's it. So yeah, it's a bit of a nervy thing. So I just had to PayPal him his money back and say, hey, if it turns up, PayPal me the money back, because it's the responsibility of the seller, in my opinion, is to behave like that. So yeah, I'm just nervous about shipping overseas. And I'm sorry to say, I don't think much is going to change, especially my most recent experience. So yeah, if you're in Australia and you've got something that's, especially one of the steels I haven't tested, flick me a message, like an email to my cedric.ada@gmail.com account. That's the best way. Facebook's hard. I struggle keeping up with Facebook. Instagram, I struggle as well because Instagram, you never see your messages. So if you actually need me for something, send me an email. I do check the Facebook from time to time and do message back if I have something meaningful to say in response. But yeah, it's a bit hard. I do get a lot of messages. I guess my channel is doing well, which is nice. So anyway, long video. Thank you for watching. I hope you've appreciated and enjoyed all this testing that I've done. I hope it's of some help to you. And if you want to hear me speak of anything more in the next one, drop me a line. All the lists, unblocked, so anyone can see it. It's just getting stored on the Patreon because that's a really nice format. It's like a good clear list. It's getting stored on the Patreon page. You don't need to be a Patreon to check it, but yeah, check it out over there. You can see the whole list of it. As I said, I'm on Patreon now. I'm not doing anything specific on there, just random stuff as I feel like doing it. There might be a little bit extra on there, but nothing that you're not already used to. You're not going to miss out on anything. That's what I'm saying. And still, even the questions, they're not just going to be from Patreons. I just get all sorts of questions so often. It's when I get to making one of these videos, I can't remember them all. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Long one, but hopefully it was worth it. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.